Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching.
The Charles and Jill Fisher Provost, John McGreevy.
Thank you all for joining us. I'm John McGreevy, I'm the provost here, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this afternoon's conversation, The Perils of Isolationism, with special guest Condoleezza Rice and Notre Dame's President Rev. Robert A. Dowd, C.S.C. As a university, we have a responsibility to foster a learning environment that facilitates respectful discussion and constructive engagement on challenging issues. One of the ways we do this is through the Notre Dame Forum. Established in 2006, the Notre Dame Forum is an annual series that invites campus-wide reflection and dialogue about issues of importance to the university, the nation, and the larger world. The university president selects the theme each year. For his inaugural Notre Dame Forum, Father Dowd has chosen a particularly timely theme: what do we owe each other? With a growing and often welcome emphasis on individual rights and freedoms, how should we, individually and collectively, think about our responsibilities to one another here on campus, in our communities, and on a global scale? How can Catholic social thought help us engage in fruitful dialogue with those whose perspectives on different issues are not our own? How can it help bridge social divides and promote unity in the midst of suffering, division, and injustice? Everyone in this room knows that the United States and the global community face a myriad of challenges. They include the growing number of authoritarian governments, the declining resolve and effectiveness of international institutions, and the weakening of long-term alliances threatened by ongoing conflicts. Secretary Condoleezza Rice is, of course, aware of all of this. In a recent Foreign Affairs article, she outlined the perils of choosing isolationism for both the United States and the global order. She also offered suggestions for how to best move forward to build an effective internationalist foreign policy to meet the challenges of the current moment. Our collective task today is to think about these challenges. So without further delay, I welcome to the stage the 18th President of the University of Notre Dame, Reverend Robert Dowd, and Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's great to welcome you here. Thanks for being here. And it's my great honor to introduce our special guest, a fellow political scientist.
Yes.
And a Notre Dame graduate.
That's right.
But I'm just so honored to welcome. Yes, let's give her a round of applause. Condoleezza Rice is the Tad and Diane Taub Director of the Hoover Institution and the Thomas and Barbara Stevenson Senior Fellow on Public Policy at Stanford University. From 2005 to 2009, Secretary Rice served as the 66th Secretary of State of the United States, the second woman and the first black woman to hold that post. She also served as President George W. Bush's assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, otherwise known as the National Security Advisor, from 2001 to 2005, the first woman to hold that position. Secretary Rice served as Stanford University's provost from 1993 to 1999, during which time she was the institution's Chief Budget and Academic Officer. Secretary Rice has a bachelor's degree from the University of Denver, a master's degree from the University of Notre Dame, and a PhD from the University of Denver, all in political science. So there's a theme there. But Secretary Rice, it's such an honor to have you back at Notre Dame. We're so fortunate that you would take the time to be with us as we begin this football weekend at Notre Dame. And I know you're an amazing sports fan. And who are you going to root for on Saturday? Yeah.
Father Dowd, I said no hard questions, all right?
I see you're wearing neutral colors.
I'm wearing neutral colors. Tomorrow I'm going to wear blue and gold for a while and red for a while. And I have to, John Kennedy was asked one time, was he going to, when Notre Dame played Navy, and he said, I think I'm going to root for Navy, but I'm going to pray for Notre Dame. So.
Wow. We'll take that as an answer. Answer along those lines. But today's conversation is very timely as we continue to explore our forum theme, what do we owe each other? And this afternoon's conversation will focus in a special way on the role of the United States in the world. And you recently wrote an article that appeared in Foreign Affairs. And that the title of that article, as John McGreevy mentioned, is The Perils of Isolationism. And in that article, you asserted that the world still needs America, and America still needs the world. Would you mind just telling us a bit about what inspired you to write that piece?
Yes, well, I wanted to write a piece that addressed head-on what I see as the emerging, what I call four horsemen of the apocalypse. That's also got a Notre Dame reference, I guess. But it's populism, nativism, isolationism, and protectionism, and they tend to ride together. And I understand that Americans may feel tired after almost 80 years of international leadership. Haven't we defeated the Soviet Union? Didn't we unify Germany? Didn't we then defeat Al-Qaeda? Couldn't somebody else do it? And what I really wanted to say to Americans is that great powers don't mind their own business. They try to shape the world. And if we don't shape it, the great powers that will shape it are authoritarians like China and Russia, and we won't like that world. But I also wanted to acknowledge that in order to do that, we have to do the traditional things, build our defense capability, learn to live in a world in which we trade freely. I believe we have to have an answer for what we call the global South, the countries of Africa, Latin America, and the like. But also, in keeping with your theme, there are an awful lot of Americans who got left out of globalization. The unemployed coal miner in West Virginia, the unemployed steel worker, and this time around, we can't just say globalization was good for you. We have to make sure that we give people the skills and the education to keep up in a world in which they have to compete. And if we can't do that, we won't be confident in international leadership.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And turning now specifically to China and the complexities of our relationship with China, it would be interesting to hear what you think. You mentioned in the article that the situation now, or the competition, if you will, with China, between China and the United States, is not the Cold War 2.0. Right. It's important to recognize that we're both deeply interconnected with China and economically reliant on China, but we are also economic and security rivals. So it's a very complex relationship, there's no doubt about it. And at the risk of direct military conflict between our nations, that risk is great, and it's just important to think about our relationship with China. How should the United States approach China at this point in time?
We have to recognize that we took something of a gamble when Deng Xiaoping decided to bring China out of isolation. And the gamble was you could fully integrate a country that wanted to join the economic part of the international order, but wanted nothing to do with the democracy part. And if you think about the time before this, the G7, the 7 largest economies in the world, they were all capitalist and they were democracies. So now that the 2nd largest economy in the world is actually an authoritarian regime, I think we're seeing that while I would argue that the integration of China achieved a lot, it lifted millions of people out of poverty, probably 500 million Chinese out of poverty. It grew the international economy considerably. It allowed manufacturing and assembly in the most efficient way, and it allowed supply chains to be efficient. But I'm not one for the great man theories of history, but I have to say that there is one man who has changed that course, and that's Xi Jinping. Because Xi Jinping really took that idea that we used to have, you can't have economic liberalization and political control. And he said, that's absolutely right, thank you very much, I'll take political control. And that one we hadn't counted on. And so you're seeing a weakening of the private sector, Alibaba, Tencent. You know, I don't think Jack Ma just wanted to go spend time with his family. I think that what you saw was a Chinese Communist Party that saw the private sector as an alternative source of power and didn't like it. China once led the world in entrepreneurs for online education startups. They just shut it down because they couldn't control it. And so what we faced then was a China that saw us as a rival and began to act that way. So when you think about the supply chains, for instance, we wake up one day and we say around COVID, you mean our entire supply chain for pharmacological goods runs through China? And wait a minute, this thing called rare earth minerals, which is the secret to everything from battery technology, you mean China owns the franchise on rare earth minerals? And then Xi Jinping gave what I think may turn out to have been one of the dumbest speeches anybody's ever given. And I've told my Chinese friends this. China is going to surpass the United States in frontier technologies like AI and quantum computing by the year 2035. Okay, well, what did he expect? It got our backs up. And then they had something called civil-military fusion. So let me get this right. We're going to invest in Chinese technology, as a lot of our venture capitalists were doing. They're then going to take that technology, turn it over to the People's Liberation Army, so that the People's Liberation Army can expel us from global leadership. Well, that doesn't sound like such a great idea. And pretty soon, you got a backlash against China. You also, fortunately for us, got a backlash among allies, so Japan, Australia, a friend like India that formed the Quad because they are disturbed by what China is doing. So I think we're in a very different world than we would have expected, but I will just say this, nobody wants a war. And there are two ways you avoid war. One is that you're strong enough to deter it, but you also don't want an accidental war. And with China, we're bumping up against their military forces a lot, and so that concerns me. The other thing is we need a workable relationship with China. We don't do nuance really well in our foreign policy. I don't know if you've noticed that, but it's not our strong point. But this time we need a more nuanced policy. And the final point that I would make is we need to stay open to the Chinese people. You know, I've heard now as we worry about Chinese students and labs and the like, well, you know, we should. That's a generation that I think will not want to live in authoritarian isolation. And so I'm all for as many Chinese students as I can get to come to Stanford and Notre Dame and wherever they'd like to go, because I think we can influence that generation about the value of democracy.
Yeah, and in fact, that was what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you what role for universities in terms of that relationship with China.
Well, with universities, let's stay open. Let's stay true to ourselves. You know, nobody wants the research we do to be used to enrich the PLA. Nobody wants that. But universities are not going to thrive if we don't remember that we benefit when we think of knowledge as without boundaries. And so I had a conversation with the FBI director, Christopher Wray, and you know, there's been a lot in the papers about whether or not the Chinese are stealing technology and so forth. And I said to him, you know, if you think somebody's working for the PLA, don't give them a visa and we won't admit them. But don't let us admit them and then tell us you have somebody working for the PLA. We're not intelligence organizations. And so I think if we do what we do best, which is educate, do it as much as we can without regard to national boundaries, we'll win the innovation war anyway.
Right. And I think also, I mean, just to build on what you said, we'll be building bridges. We'll be building bridges between the Chinese people and the people of the United States in ways that hopefully help us to develop a more amicable relationship.
Yes, down the road.
Down the road.
That's
yeah,
right.
It take a while, but it's an investment in the future, and it's sort of an investment in peace.
It is.
In a peaceful future. So let's turn to Russia.
Yes.
Yes. So, you know, the world continues to watch Russia and its invasion into Ukraine. It's terrible. The suffering is great. It's gone on for 2 years now. And I know that you have deep, deep experience engaging with Vladimir Putin and navigating the U.S. relationship with Russia. So what do you see happening as we move forward in this tragic conflict? Where do we stand?
Well, I do know Vladimir Putin pretty well. And in fact, he kind of liked me early on because he thought I was a Russianist, I would understand them, and so forth. But no, he always had this ambition about reconstituting the Russian Empire, not the Soviet Union, the Russian Empire. He told me once, Condi, you know us, Russia's only been great when it's been ruled by great men, like Alexander II and Peter the Great. He didn't say Lenin, Stalin. He said the Tsars at the furthest expanse of the Russian Empire. And so that was his ambition. But what is puzzling is what turned his ambition into a plan in 2022 to try to extinguish an independent Ukrainian state. And I think there were three miscalculations. One is he really didn't understand that Ukraine is a distinct nationality, a distinct nation. He thought they wouldn't fight. The Russians went with 5 days provisions and their dress uniforms for the parade in Kyiv. That's how long they thought it would take. And now he finds that there's a fierce Ukrainian nationalism. Secondly, he thought his army was good. They're not. And that's been a shock to him. And third, he didn't think anybody would respond, and we have. Now, we need to make him pay for those miscalculations. We can't live in a world in which a great power just extinguishes its smaller neighbor. We don't want to send that message to Xi Jinping about Taiwan, for instance. And so it's tough, but remember that the Ukrainians are not asking us for a single soldier. They're just asking us for the means to defend themselves. And I hope we can muster the international will to continue to do that. It's tough going. There are different geographies within this war. It's really tough going in the East because the Russians have brought what they always bring, which is a lot of mass. It's a big country. By the way, they're throwing these young boys at the front. They're basically poorly armed. They're not trained, but they're not the boys from Moscow and St. Petersburg. They're these poor kids from in places like Dagestan because he doesn't think that will cause an uprising. It's grinding the Ukrainians down in the East because they don't have the manpower to keep forward, and the Russians are making slow progress. But the Ukrainians are going to do what we always said the Russians did. They're going to wait for winter. Pretty soon, you're not going to be able to move in that territory. A couple months, it'll be permafrost. And then on the other side, Ukraine will have to start looking at the things it has achieved. It has thwarted Vladimir Putin's desire to extinguish the Ukrainian nation. Do you know that Ukraine doesn't have a navy, but has pushed the Russian navy back from Sevastopol in the Black Sea, which the Russian Navy occupied since Catherine the Great? How have they done it? Drones. So they've accomplished a lot, and we will see, but we need to keep supporting them because if Vladimir Putin wins this war, he won't stop. It will be a time when suddenly our obligations to Poland and the Baltic states under Article 5 of the NATO Treaty, an attack upon one is an attack upon all, we don't want to go there. And so we've got to steel ourselves and continue to help the Ukrainians.
Yeah. How long do you think Putin can continue that war with enough support? I know that dictators usually don't rely on popular opinion to stay in power, but nonetheless a certain degree of popularity is probably necessary. How long do you think Putin can continue to send young men, even if they're from the countryside and from the far-off provinces, into that war?
That meat grinder.
Meat grinder, yeah.
No, he's managed to basically kill off or expel anybody who would have disagreed.
Yeah.
He's managed to rebuild their capability through just militarizing the country. Some people say they're spending as much as 45% of their GDP on the military. They admit to 35%, which tells you something. That he's mortgaged his country. They're never going to be able to produce energy in the same way because the big companies like Exxon and BP and Shell won't go back, and they have the technology. There was a memo leaked from Gazprom that they will not be profitable till 2035. So inside, people know what's happening, but there's no evidence that he's going to lose his grip on power. And I will say, given the den of thieves around him, I'm not sure that there's anybody decent to really take his place. Yeah. I have to say, seeing Vladimir Putin go to Pyongyang to beg for weapons, that says something. And I don't know if you followed this, but apparently now little Russian children are going to get to go to summer camp in Pyongyang. Doesn't that sound like fun? So, little Olga and little Alexei are going to get to spend the summer in Pyongyang. So it's in some ways a very sad story about Russia.
Yeah, very much so. So I'm an Africanist. My specialty is African politics. And so I just have a question about both Russia and China and their role in other parts of the world, and I'm thinking especially of the global south. Yeah. And could you say a few words about that? I mean, China in particular now for some time has been deeply engaged in Africa. Yes. And cutting deals with African leaders. Anyway, what should the United States do in response to this growth in Chinese influence in parts of the world like Africa?
Well, I say this from the platform of somebody who was in an administration that cared a lot about Africa. Yes. The President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief saved 25 million lives, and it's still saving lives. We, of quadrupled assistance to Africa. We ended the civil war in Liberia. Colin Powell at least temporarily ended the civil war in Sudan. I think President Bush met with as many African leaders as he did European leaders. And so we focused on Africa. And that would be the answer I would give you. We can't say to, whether it's Africa or Latin America, you know, don't do those deals with China and then do nothing ourselves.
Right.
And so we have a better value proposition for them than China will ever have. You mentioned that basically what Belt and Road does is it gives you a bunch of loans. When you can't pay them back, the Chinese say they claim the port, although that's not working so well in the 21st century. People are fighting back. They don't bring jobs for people. They bring in Chinese labor, and countries don't develop. Our way of doing this has to be to go in, help with the nonprofits that we fund, but to build the capacity of these countries, to help them fight corruption, to help them improve women's rights. You know, I've very often said if I could wave a magic wand and do one thing that would make development easier, I would improve the lot of women in the Global South. And there's a very, very good reason for that. Women, look at the number of women who start small businesses. You look at what happens when you have these child soldiers. You know, women don't want their children going off as child soldiers. And so we have a formula for how you then attract private investment and investment from the private sector. And that's multiples of what you can do with Belt and Road. But we have to pay attention, and it can't be episodic, and it can't be a summit and then you don't do anything about it. And so I don't think it's an answer of saying don't deal with the Chinese, or our favorite thing, loyalty test, you know, just whose side are you on? But rather having this program that I think will really improve the lives of people and will give us influence in those places. And there's one member of the Global South, India, that I think doesn't really fit because, look, India is a great power in its own right. It's demographic advantages, but also look at its technology. I mean, it's IITs, it's technological universities. The Indians managed something amazing, a biometric ID for every Indian in a country of 1 billion plus people. I was in New Delhi a little over a year ago, and they were talking about how they used the biometric ID to manage COVID. And I took out my, you know, if you go and they say, well, your shot's not due for 2 weeks because that's what your biometric ID said. So I took out my tattered little vaccine card, and I said, this is how a really sophisticated country managed COVID. So sometimes we forget that there are other people who are doing the technology thing pretty well. I think India is one of them.
Well, that's a great point. So one final question before we bring out some students who have some questions of their own. You know, the theme of the forum, the Notre Dame Forum this year, is what do we owe each other? And it's interesting just to think about the role of the United States in the world. I know that there are probably some people in our audience or some people who are joining us by live stream who think the U.S. has done enough. You know, let's let other countries solve their own problems. Let's let Europe, you know, take responsibility, their fair share of responsibility. Let's pull back a bit. And then there are others who probably think, well, no, the U.S. must act. The U.S. must be deeply engaged. So, you know, to some extent, both perspectives are understandable. But what do you think the right answer is? I think I know how you're going to answer this question.
Well, let me give you a practical reason, and that's the reason I gave at the beginning. You know, great powers don't mind their own business. It'll either be us or the Chinese or the Russians. I'll take us. But let me give you a moral case as well. I suspect you know to whom much is given, much is expected. And for all of our problems, and look, we have been far from perfect in the way that we have engaged the world. We've been far from perfect as a democracy. My ancestors were counted as 3/5 of a man in the first Constitution. But I think if you look at what we can be in the world and what we have sometimes been in the world, to stand for the proposition that no man, woman, or child should have to live in tyranny is important. To speak for the voiceless in prisons for human rights, for religious freedom. Who else speaks for those people? We have not always done it well, but I mentioned, for instance, President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. And of course, well before that, there was the Peace Corps, which is still going strong. And so I think we have tried to marry our great power and our very important principles with a sense of compassion as well. The United States has always been the largest donor of food aid in the world. And we've done it without regard to who gets the food aid. Do you know we were once the largest food aid donor to Afghanistan under the Taliban, to North Korea, because we were never willing to use food as a weapon. And so we have some principles on which we can rely. And it's not just what the US government has done. We have an incredible group, an incredible infrastructure of civil society and non-governmental organizations, many of them faith-based, that have cared about the rest of the world. And so we don't always get credit for it. Sometimes people don't appreciate a big power like ours. But I think we have a practical reason to stay engaged, and we have a moral reason to stay engaged. And so I hope that whoever occupies the Oval Office in January, and I'm just going to wake up and say whatever, I hope that that person will continue to argue for American leadership.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Secretary Rice. So at this time, I just want to invite two of our great students to come out. One is Tia Mittel, and the other is Patrick Smart. And Tia, and there you are. Tia and Patrick, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves and please ask your questions.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Secretary Rice, for being here today. We as students are so grateful to hear your perspective. And thank you, Father Bob, for facilitating this conversation. My name is Tia Mittal. I am a junior studying global affairs and political science with a minor in international development studies. I'm from Mumbai, India, and I'm so honored to be here today. My question to you, Secretary Rice, is, considering the rise of populism and isolationist tendencies within the United States, what, according to you, are some concrete steps that policymakers should take to kind of effectively communicate what the benefits of long-term globalization would look like, especially to people who may be increasingly skeptical of global engagement today?
Yes, thank you. It's a very good question. I think that the first thing is that we need to talk about it. Right? If you are looking at the politics these days, we aren't talking much about this. And yet somebody is going to ask to be the American president, and we've really not had anybody say, here's what I think America's role in the world is and why. The second is sometimes you have to paint a picture of what it would look like without American leadership and remind people that every time we have tried to withdraw from the world, we've had to re-enter. So there was a war that started in 1914. By 1917 in Europe, we were in that war. 1938 to 1939, by 1941, we were in that war. In 2001, we thought the security threat was out there. It ended up at the Pentagon and at the World Trade Center. And so sometimes you have to paint that picture of what it's like. I also think, as I suggested, we have to admit to some of the challenges that we've had. Whether it is what people will sometimes call endless wars, although I would remind, when we talk about Afghanistan, it actually wasn't our longest war. Our longest war is still underway, and that's Korea, where we are in an armistice still with American forces there. And would anybody give up the stability that we've seen on the Korean Peninsula because we were willing to stay? And then I would say that we need to say to our fellow citizens, we do understand that it hasn't always worked for you. And here's how we're going to make sure that this time around, American engagement, not by saying we're going to put 200% tariffs on foreign cars, okay? You know, that would be a shock to those workers in Alabama who make Mercedes. So we have to explain that, in fact, there are real benefits to real citizens from globalization. When it hasn't worked, next time around we'll be more attentive to how it works.
Thank you so much.
Hello, Secretary Rice. My name is Patrick. I'm a senior studying economics. I'm originally from New Jersey. I have a little bit of a blur before I ask my question. So, in your recent foreign affairs piece, you argued that the United States should pursue a meaningful alternative to the Belt and Road Initiative. You argued that the US, Japan, and Europe should use investments from the private sector to dwarf investments from the Chinese government. From my perspective, one potential issue with private investment is that foreign firms from developed countries can dominate developing markets, and that the administration of a host country may relax labor, environmental, or financial regulations to induce foreign companies and investment to establish or maintain business there. So my question is, how should the US encourage private investment that allows countries to develop their domestic economies without fostering dependence on foreign capital or weakening labor, environmental, financial regulations?
Yes, so I was saying, and I think this is a very important element of it, we have to convince people that the development strategy that we can offer is preferable to a development strategy that is rife with corruption, where you don't get any real growth and jobs from it, and where maybe you're just kind of enriching the minister with whom you signed the document. I was once talking with Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who was the president of Liberia, and she said, I want my country to sign with American and British companies. I said, why? She said, because you have that Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and I know that the money's going to the right place, right? We need to go and say that, and we need to educate increasingly sophisticated populations about this. We did a program at the Hoover Institution for African journalists, trying to help them understand how Belt and Road really works. Because if you understand that your country's about to take on a lot of debt, which if you can't pay back, the Chinese are going to claim that port or claim that building, maybe you'll start to say to your government even, what's happening to our money? We need to keep pressing for transparency. We have a transparency index and we have a transparency initiative through the UN that's kind of moribund at this point. Nobody pays much attention to it. But if you can get transparency on how some of this works, I think there will be pressure on governments to start to do what's right for their people. And what's right for their people is for them to fight corruption, which, as many have said, is a tax on the poor. They will have to recognize that they really ought to be bringing jobs to their people, not just largesse for themselves. And I think we can start to turn it around, but then we'd better actually follow through on our side.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Tia. Thank you very much. So, Secretary Rice, we're nearing the end of our time. Any closing thoughts this afternoon?
Well, I'm always delighted to be back at Notre Dame. This place was very, very special to me. I came to Notre Dame as a very young graduate student, and it had a real effect on me.
You told me you were 19.
I was 19, that's right. But you know, time catches up. I'm not 19 anymore. So, but what I really love about this place, and I hope that each and every one of you soaks it in while you're here, is that there really is an emphasis, not just on the learning, although there's an emphasis on that, not just on what you're going to do when you get out of here, although there's an emphasis on that, but of how you mature into people that have the right values as you do so. And I think we don't spend enough time these days talking about the importance of developing your values, your value system, and really kind of understanding that that's a part of who you are. I want to say something particularly to the students here. One of the most important values that you can develop is the willingness to listen to those with whom you don't agree. It is very easy, particularly in the days of the internet, to go to your tribe, to go to your aggregators, your influencers, your websites, only talk to people who think like you do, and to become overly confident in your own high opinion of your opinion. Because you really, particularly in a university, our search for truth means that we all have to be open to the possibility that we're wrong. And I'm delighted that Notre Dame is providing so many opportunities and so many fora for you to do that. I hope you'll do it, and in dorms or wherever, don't avoid those difficult conversations. But sometimes if you're going to have a difficult conversation, just one other thought. It's really important to listen, not just transmit. And I think you'll find that those are values that will serve you well throughout your life.
Yes. Thank you. Secretary Rice, we just can't thank you enough that you would take time out of your very busy schedule to be in conversation with us, to visit with us, and to share your thoughts. So important, I think, for us to hear what you have to say, to read that article. If you haven't read it, it's a great article in Foreign Affairs, The Perils of Isolationism. But it's just so important. The message, I think, that you've left us with here really does get us thinking about our role and responsibilities in the world, not only as individuals, but as a country. And so I'm just so grateful for your leadership. And I look forward to staying in touch with you as we move forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I know at this point I'm supposed to go Irish. I'm going to say go Irish, but I can't repeat that other part about beat somebody, right?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We have a little... Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
We are adjourned. Thank you for such a wonderful conversation, President Dowd and Secretary Rice.